Hello Mila, hello Jack. Hello everybody else who's watching. Welcome to Storytime with Grandad. Today's book is from Willo the Wisp and it is The Gnome. Hello, I'm Willo the Wisp. Have you ever met a gnome? Mavis Cruitt met one the other day in Doyley Woods. I'll tell you all about it, if you like. Listen, it happened like this. One day, that fat little fairy, Mavis Cruitt, was strolling through the woods and humming to herself. Tum-tum-ti-tum, hummed Mavis. Tum-tum-ti-tum. Oh, said Mavis suddenly. There, standing right in front of her, stood a stranger. Oh, said Mavis again, staring hard at the stranger. Who are you? I, lady, said the stranger, am a gnome. Lady, sighed Mavis, immediately warming to the stranger. No one had ever called her lady before. Well, dear, cooed Mavis, don't go any further down that path if you want to stay being a gnome. Evil Edna, the wicked witch, is lurking about down there, and she could turn you into almost anything with one of those evil spells. Oh, she wouldn't hurt me, said the gnome. Everyone loves a gnome. And with that, the gnome walked off down the path, leaving Mavis looking a little worried. Presently, Mavis met Arthur the caterpillar. Arthur, said Mavis excitedly, you'll never guess I've just met a real live gnome. There's no such thing, said Arthur, dismissing the idea with a wave of his hand. Gnomes are figments of the imagination. I tell you, I've just met one, persisted Mavis. Come on, I'll introduce you. Meanwhile, the gnome had just met a curious object, and the curious object looked very much like a camera. Good morning, said the camera. Only the camera wasn't a camera at all. It was evil Edna in disguise. I am a camera, croaked Edna. A camera that is looking for a handsome gnome to photograph for the cover of Ideal Gnome magazine. And, chuckled Edna, focusing her lens upon the poor, unsuspecting gnome, I think I found him. Well, the gnome was clearly flattered. He blushed all over and looked coyly at the camera. Now, said Edna, just sit over there and pretend you're fishing. Like this, said the gnome, finding himself a sort of fishing rod and squatting cross-legged on the ground. Excellent, cried Edna. Then evil Edna changed back into herself and crackled her aerials. In a sizzling flash, Edna had turned the poor gnome into stone. Ha ha, cackled Edna. I shall turn every gnome in the world into stone, and then I shall become rich. Rich. Everyone buys stone garden gnomes nowadays. Well, a few minutes later, Mavis and Arthur came along. Look, Arthur, said Mavis, pointing. There he is, and oh, look, he's fishing. How sweet. How daft, said Arthur. Who ever heard of someone fishing in the middle of a wood? Cooey, here I am again, said Mavis, bouncing over to where the gnome was sitting. The gnome, however, said nothing. Hello, Mr. Gnome, said Mavis again, a little puzzled by the gnome's stony silence. Still, the gnome said nothing. Ask him if he's caught anything, giggled Arthur. Mr. Gnome, shouted Mavis, speak to me. At which point Arthur said calmly, You, Mavis Cruitt, have been chatting to a garden ornament. And to prove it, said Arthur, rapping his knuckles sharply on the gnome's kneecap, listen to this. Rat-tat-tat. Solid stone, said Arthur triumphantly. Stone? Gasped Mavis. But I'm sure that's my dear little gnome who called me lady. Ha ha, cackled a familiar voice behind them. It was evil Edna.
It was your dear little gnome, but it's a stone gnome now. And furthermore, continued Edna, you two are now the employees of Edna's Garden Ornaments Limited, so move that valuable piece of garden sculpture over to my place.
Well, Mavis and Arthur tried their best to lift the gnome, but it was very heavy. Then, just as they were struggling to move it, crunch! They dropped it on Edna's foot.
Ouch! Screamed Edna. Get that stupid gnome off my foot, you clumsy creatures!
Oh dear, cried Mavis. We can't move it, Edna. We're just not strong enough, are we, Arthur? Arthur shook his head. But, said Mavis, who had just thought of a brilliant idea, you could change the stone gnome back into a real gnome, Edna. Then you could ask him nicely to get off your foot. Which was, of course, precisely what Edna had to do. It took just 2 crackles of her aerials to bring the poor gnome back to life. Then, before anyone could say anything, whoosh, the gnome rushed off out of sight.
Now, said evil Edna, rubbing her painful foot and fixing Mavis and Arthur with a wicked stare, I wonder if there's any demand for stone caterpillars and fairies as garden ornaments these days.
But Mavis and Arthur didn't wait to find out. The end. Goodbye, Mila. Goodbye, Jack. I'll see you soon. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.